"We'll just say she can't handle money," my aunt whispered, as if my hearing had retired before I did. The room absorbed it, thick carpet-swallowing footfall, lemon polish rising off the dining table like a memory. A grandfather clock exhaled in patient clicks. I stood in the doorway long enough to learn the grain of the maple under my fingers. She leaned close to my cousin's ear, her hand cupped like she was holding a jewel that might roll away if she breathed too hard. She met my daughter Emily, 24, careful as a spreadsheet, soft as the scarf she loops 3 times in winter, because once and twice never feel like enough. The plan wore reasonable clothes, invoke the trust prudence clause, argue that the duplex my mother left inside the trust would be temporarily better managed by someone with a steadier hand, my aunt's, not mine. Not Emily's, certainly not the quiet man who has balanced rent ledgers in pencil for 3 decades, and has scars on his knuckles from learning which pipes lie. I said nothing. My silence is not a vacuum. It has weight. I let it press on the room until the sugar in the coffee went flat. "Morning, Richard," my aunt said eventually, lifting her chin a practiced inch. Her smile tried to close the door with me still standing in the frame. "We're just looking for the stable path. Emily's a dear. She'll thank us later." Stability is a polite word for my control. The folder on the table wore neatly labeled tabs. Statements, title, proposed interim trustee language. Her nails pale pink, pointed tapped a rhythm against the manila as if a metronome could make a theft respectable. My cousin nodded on cue, shoe leather squeaking when he shifted weight. He speaks fluent reasonable in rooms where the bill will never land on his plate. Repairs, taxes, tenants. My aunt counted a rosary of responsibilities. We can carry the burden for a quarter or two, just until Emily demonstrates she can handle the distributions without sentiment. Sentiment in her mouth sounds like a diagnosis. I sat. The chair breathed out. In the wall frames, my mother held a rose bush at stern attention. She wrote instructions inside the way she kept gloves, quietly, in a drawer you never noticed until winter. She didn't do half measures. She held that duplex through unheated Februaries, through tenants who paid with apology more often than cash. Her will tucked the building into a trust, with one simple charge. Let the income help Emily finish school and start clean. It wasn't charity. It was a sober promise between 3 generations. "I'll read the papers," I said. I already had. Twice, under the kitchen lamp at 2 in the morning, steam rising from a mug that tasted like pennies. The trust allowed an interim trustee if the name one my sister, gone these 4 years, couldn't serve, and if a majority of living heirs agreed. My aunt had always been good at math when the variables were people. Majority meant her, my cousin, a brother-in-law with a long memory for favors, and a family friend who owed her a holiday dinner. Majority meant whisper "she can't handle money" into a readied room, and watch the nods arrange themselves like cutlery. "Rest," my cousin said, smiling over the papers. "You've earned it. Rest." The soft word for step aside. I lifted the coffee they'd poured me too sweet, because my aunt sweetens for guests without asking, and said, "I sleep fine." Behind my face, the ledger turned pages. On the first, me at 33, rewiring a unit at dusk because the heater tripped and there was a baby in the next room. Fingers too numb to feel the screwdriver, the kind of cold that sews itself into your lower back and takes up permanent residence. I charged half of what the work was worth. They brought me coffee in a chipped mug and apologized for the cup like they'd broken a window. On the second page, my mother folding a bill lengthwise before handing it to me. "We don't make money a theater," she said. "We use it to make things steady." On the third, 17-year-old Emily, cross-legged on the kitchen floor, copying my rent columns into her own notebook, asking what the difference was between a payment and a promise. 2 months, I told her. "And whether a person looks you in the eye?" "We'll need your signature today," my aunt said in the tone fireplaces use to pretend they're warm when there's no wood. "It makes everything easier." "For whom?" I asked very gently. "For the trust," she said, letting the word family hover like a candle scent. "For Emily." "I'll take the folder home," I said. "I'll call the attorney this afternoon." The clock clicked its agreement with someone I couldn't tell who, and I carried the weight out of the house. On the hallway wall, a picnic photograph bent at the corner, a crease running through my father's shoulder where a child had once folded it wrong, and learned that paper, like people, remembers where you forced it. Outside, late afternoon, lean toward evening with that tired light that stops pretending it will last. I drove with the radio off. The engine hummed the only song I needed. People like to say business isn't personal. They say it as if checks sign themselves. Most business is a ledger of private choices written in public ink. Every line item is the story of how you treat a stranger when something breaks, and whether you return calls on Fridays after 4. At home, the kitchen table took the folder like a judge accepting evidence. There's a nick in the wood from 2 summers ago where Emily dropped a glass and we both laughed, so we wouldn't cry about how fast a thing becomes shards. I laid out the papers in a fan and read top to bottom, then bottom to top. Sometimes the last line tells you exactly what the first wanted to hide. Then I called Emily. She answered on the second ring, breath a little high stares, or laughter, or both. How bad? She asked. Manageable, I said. They want to stabilize your distributions. She repeated the word like she was trying to find where it hid its teeth. Meaning, take them. Meaning, hold the spigot and call it a service, I said. Only until you prove you can bear responsibility. The exam has no posted date. She was quiet long enough for me to picture the pen in her fingers, the narrowed eyes she borrowed from her grandmother. We'll fight, she said. We'll count, I said. Counting is a better fight. After we hung up, I pulled a yellow legal pad forward. On the first line I wrote, who owes who? I listed the tenants by apartment number, their rent, their arrears, the repair promises I'd made and kept. Not because my aunt would honor any of it, but because I wanted the building to see I still knew its name. On the second page I wrote, what I can buy quietly. Under that, 2 small units, side by side, honest bones, on a block where people hang laundry on Sundays and bring their own chairs to watch the evening. Keep title in my name. Repairs in cash until the paint dries. Leases ironclad, fair, applied without exception, even when the request comes with a blood tie tangled around it. I slept like a man counting to 10 between each breath. By morning, the plan had learned to stand. I called the trust attorney in my even voice, the one I keep for necessary weather. I'll acknowledge an interim trustee for 1 quarter, I said. Distributions continue on schedule. No management fee above the clause's percentage. Repairs remain with me through transition. I want copies of all communications to tenants. He cleared his throat in that way attorneys do when gravity walks into the room and sits down. Your aunt will do what she does, I said. I'll do what the papers allow. After the call, I drafted a lease template. Not because I needed it that minute, because a hand that writes intention becomes a hand that keeps it. Lines appeared neat as fence pickets. Term, rent, due date, late fee, landlord obligations, quiet enjoyment. That last phrase has always sounded like a prayer to me. It's what homes owe silence, and the right to breathe inside it. I ate lunch standing up cold chicken, the pinch of salt that makes plain food honest, and drove a loop past the streets where I know the houses well enough to greet them. 2 blocks over, a "for sale by owner" sign had appeared in front of a tired duplex wearing its flaws like an old coat. Paint sighing at the eaves, a mail slot missing its flap, concrete steps that had slumped toward the earth just enough to make you notice. Good bones. Repairs that ask for wrenches, not miracles. A neighbor in a housecoat stepped onto her porch and looked at me the way people look at weather from a doorway. You buying? She asked, not unkindly. I keep places honest, I said. She laughed once. We could use honest. The owner, Mr. Alvarez, met me that evening. Knees gone, Florida calling. He shook my hand with the gratitude of a man whose body has begun to invent reasons for the rest of him. We walked through the rooms. They smelled like last year's paint and this year's soap. In the back bedroom, sunlight pooled on a warped floorboard like water. I could see the work and feel my hands wanting it. We talked numbers. He had 1 in his head. I had 2 in mine. We found the 3rd number that sits between people when both are telling the truth. I told him I'd bring a modest, earnest check in the morning, a plain promise folded lengthwise. On the way home, my phone lit up with a text from my cousin. Aunt Lorraine wants your signature today. Keep it smooth. Smooth, another polite word this time for uncontested. I typed back, attorney will coordinate. No rush fees for other people's urgency. I left off the period. Some statements don't need a stamp. At the kitchen table, I pulled my mother's note from the folder. Her handwriting leaned right like it was following something it trusted. Let it carry its own weight. Don't make it a fight. Beneath, the trusty clause was underlined, as if she had looked forward and found only this one underlinable thing. If I'd been a younger man, I might have marched into a courtroom and tried to set the air on fire. Time has taught me to choose the fuel. Courts take your breath in exchange for a verdict that often needs a second verdict to explain itself. Contracts, on the other hand, are weather you can predict. A lease does not care about whispers at dining tables. It cares about due dates and signatures and whether the check clears by the 5th I slept like wood settles. In the morning, I bought the duplex. It wasn't dramatic. We sat at a small title office that smelled like toner and raincoats. The closing agent slid papers in a choreography she has performed 1,000 times and will perform 1,000 more. Mr. Alvarez signed like a man setting down a bag at the end of a long trip. I signed like a man picking it up and checking the straps. The keys were warm. They always are, right after a closing, as if hands remember hands. I drove straight to the property and walked each unit slowly, turning on taps, flushing, opening and closing windows to feel the way frames complain and hinges explain. In the front closet of the left unit, someone had left a wire hanger twisted into the shape of a heart. I tossed it into a box by the door without thinking too hard about what we keep and what we pretend not to. Home again, I built 2 files thick, careful manila, 1 per unit. I printed the lease template and set it aside with a clean pen. Then I made the call. My aunt answered on the second ring. "Richard," she said, voice wrapped in cotton. "No need for drama." "No," I said. "There rarely is." "We'll move ahead," she said. "Interim trustee. Accountant agrees. The property needs a firm hand." "Good," I said. "A firm hand knows the clause. Distributions on time. Fees within percentage. Repairs mine until transition. All tenant communications copied to me. Silence isn't empty. It has furniture in it." I could hear hers, carefully arranged. "You don't trust me," she said at last. "I don't hire family without a contract," I said. "You taught me that." "Richard," she said, lowering her voice half an inch, the way some people genuflect, "we're family." "Yes," I said, "and I'm very clear." I ended the call before the room could congratulate itself for how civil we were. That evening, Emily came by with still warm bread, in a paper bag, in a face that makes rooms look true. We sat at the table that remembers our meals and our arguments. I told her about Mr. Alvarez, about the keys, about the phrase quiet enjoyment, and what it demands of a landlord and a life. She listened the way my mother used to without interrupting the sentence she knew was on its way. "So," she said finally, eyes lit like ledger lines, "if they decide we can't handle money, we handle doors." "Exactly," I said, and slid the keys across the table. They made the smallest sound, like 2 coins agreeing. "Who are the tenants?" she asked. "Not yet chosen," I said, "but I suspect the neighborhood will help us decide." The next afternoon, the neighborhood obliged. A knock on my new door. A woman in her 30s, polite posture wrapped around a storm of life, asked about the for rent sign I hadn't posted yet. "A friend of a friend," she said, name of the neighbor in the housecoat, eyebrows high with hope and caution. Her mother, she explained, needed a place nearby. Fixed income, quiet, clean. She lifted her hands as if she were weighing the words and hoping I'd see they didn't lie. Her mother stepped forward from the walkway's shade, a familiar shape in an unfamiliar coat. It took a beat to find the face under the years. Then it found me, my aunt's friend from the family circle, the one who had nodded along at the lemon-polished table. We toured the unit. The mother ran 2 fingers along a windowsill the way people test a person's story for dust. She asked about heat, water, trash, not a single word wasted on who I was to her friends, sisters, son. At the end, the daughter asked for an application. "We can provide references," she said. "You should," I said, "and I'll call them." We stood on the stoop. Sun slid down the street like a shift change. "Is the rent firm?" the daughter asked carefully. "It's fair," I said. "Fair is firm," she nodded. "We can make fair." They left with the application tucked between hope and a grocery list. I watched them go and felt the plan settle its feet on the floorboards. At home, the folder from my aunt sat neat on the table beside 2 new files, bright with clean tabs. I opened my mother's note one more time and pressed my thumb against the underline until the paper remembered it had been touched. By dark, my cousin texted again, "Aunt says you're being difficult. Just sign." I placed the phone face down on the table and wrote instead, "Buy what lasts. Under-racked in public. Over-prep in private. Charge fair. Enforce quietly." Then I slept, and the sleep was the good, kind, solid, unremarkable, not the kind that brags in the morning. In the days that followed, the attorney sent revised language. I approved exactly what I said I would and nothing more. Distributions remained. Fees shrank to their legal size. Tenant notices came to me for signature. I signed in ink the color of dry bark. The daughter returned with the application complete. I called references and heard the right kind of silence between words. I ran the numbers and felt the old click inside the one that tells me a month can be paid without someone giving up a meal. I handed them the lease and a pen that writes evenly. The mother's hand was steady. "Thank you," she said, and the U landed squarely on the table. On the way out, she turned. "I know your aunt," she said simply. Not an accusation, not a plea, just a map pinned to the wall. "I know her too," I said. When they left, I locked the door and leaned my head lightly against the frame. Wood knows when you are telling it the truth. The trouble with memory is that it doesn't fade in order. It comes back like a leaking pipe you don't choose the drip. After my aunt's whisper, after the duplex keys found their place in my pocket, I kept thinking about the years behind me. People assume revenge begins the moment you're insulted. That's only half the truth. Real revenge begins much earlier, when you're still busy sacrificing, when you're giving away time and money no one thanks you for. I was 28 the first time I skipped rent on my own apartment to cover the shortfall of a tenant who had lost his job at the mill. He brought me a small bag of apples as thanks. I ate them one by one, over a week, and each bite tasted like both charity and hunger. No one in my family knew. They never asked how I managed to keep the books steady when the economy didn't care. At 35, my hands smelled of copper because every Saturday I was soldering pipes in one unit or another. Emily was just a girl then, following me with her notebook. "You write everything down," she said. "Because everything counts," I told her. She copied the words like scripture. At 40, my mother slipped an envelope into my coat. $500. "Not to spend," she said. "To remind you it exists." She believed in reminders more than speeches. She knew I was covering too many cousins' late fees. She knew I'd never tell. I kept those reminders folded in a box. Every sacrifice, every overlooked hour, every unpaid repair was stored there, not in dollars, but in memory. And that's why my aunt's whisper cut the way it did. Because it wasn't just about Emily or the duplex. It was about all the invisible labor I had carried, the kind she had never lifted a finger for, being erased with a single sentence. "He can't handle money. The older I get, the less I raise my voice. But I do keep my books balanced." Sacrifice has its own smell: sawdust in your hair, bleach on your shirt, the faint rust of tools that will outlive you. I remember a Thanksgiving when the furnace died in Building 3. Everyone else was eating pie. I was under a grate with my hands black with soot. Emily was 12, sitting nearby with her homework on her knees, the flashlight propped between her shoulder and ear. My aunt never asked where we were that night. She only asked later why my shirt smelled of smoke when we finally arrived at dessert. She thought sacrifice was an excuse for poor planning. I knew it was the opposite. It was the plan that made survival possible. I also remember how many times I opened my door to family. My cousin, yes, the same one who nods for my aunt, once borrowed $3,000 when his car was repossessed. I gave it without interest. He paid back $2,000, late. I never asked for the rest. He still drives a replacement today, leather seats worn smooth by his comfort, or the time my aunt herself needed a roof repair. She came with the same voice she uses in church, sweet, rehearsed, heavy with the weight of implied virtue. I patched her shingles in August heat. I sweated like a young man, though I was already old. She paid me half of what she'd promised. The rest, she said, she would make right at Christmas. Christmas came and went. She gifted me a scarf. People think silence means you've forgotten. They confuse patience for weakness. What they don't understand is that silence is a ledger too. I was writing down every apple, every unpaid hour, every missing dollar, not in ink, but in resolve. So when she whispered, "We'll just say she can't handle money," I realized she had been rehearsing that line for decades. The only difference now was that I was ready to answer without raising my voice, without breaking a law, without even stepping outside my chair. Emily doesn't know half the sacrifices behind her inheritance. I don't want her to. She doesn't need the weight. She only needs the fruit of it, the security, the independence. She doesn't need to know that her uncle once tried to undercut me on a contract, or that her aunt smiled while shorting me $200 on labor. She only needs to know that I'll never let anyone take her roof away with words as cheap as whispers. My aunt didn't swing a hammer. She arranged furniture. She moved people into place, set up a centerpiece of prudence, and invited everyone to admire how tasteful it looked. The first week after the interim trustee letter went out, the decorations began. Tenants at my mother's duplex received a notice on cream paper with a respectable logo I'd never seen. Lorraine Management and Trust Services. The font did a lot of heavy lifting. It informed them, in obedient paragraphs, that for clarity and stability, all rent would henceforth be paid to a new P.O. box, that repair requests should be emailed to a generic address, and that any informal arrangements made with family members are to be considered discontinued. It ended with a sentence that tried to be kind and managed only to be smug. Our goal is to protect vulnerable beneficiaries while ensuring the property's long-term viability. Vulnerable. That was a new frame around Emily's name. I read the notice at my kitchen table with the steady hum of the refrigerator making a kind of bass note under the words. The paper smelled faintly of ink, and a little like the lemon polish in my aunt's dining room, familiar notes in an unfamiliar song. I put the notice down, picked it back up, then held it to the light. There are tells in paper if you look. The watermark was cheap, the logo was new, the confidence was borrowed. I called the attorney in the same voice I use with broken vows, calm, meticulous. 2 things, I said. 1. Distribution timing remains unaltered per clause. 2. Tenant communications must be copied to me for co-signature on any directives that alter past practices during transition. We agreed to this on the record. He took a breath I could hear over the line. You're correct, he said. I'll remind them. The second paper came the next day, delivered to me, not the tenants. A request that I surrender the spare keys to Lorraine Management and Trust Services for centralized control. There are words that put themselves in quotes even when you don't ask them to. Request. Centralized. Control. I slid the letter under my mother's note and pressed my palm down until I could feel the grain of the table through both sheets. I remembered the last time someone used the word centralized in a room with me, a contractor talking about replacing every functioning shutoff valve for consistency. It would have cost triple. I had told him consistency was a virtue for choir directors, not piping. Another day, another decor item. My cousin called, casual as a weatherman. Aunt Lorraine says we need to freeze distributions until accounts are consolidated, he said. Just a week or 2. Emily will be fine. Consolidated where? I asked. Into an oversight account, he said, pleased with the sound of it. It's cleaner. Cleaners are for floors, I said. Send me the proposed account terms, custodial entity, signatories, and fee schedule. I'll approve what the clause allows and nothing more. He sighed into the phone like a man denied a second dessert. You make everything so technical. Technical is what keeps the roof on, I said, and ended the call before he could practice a tone he hadn't earned. That Sunday, I stood in the back of church the way I always do near the exit. Not because I planned to leave early, but because I like to watch people walk out into daylight, as if they've been freshly unwrapped. After the service, my aunt found me in the social hall, where coffee tastes like forgiveness and donuts taste like childhood. She touched my sleeve with 2 fingers. We're on the same side, she said without hello. Then you won't mind producing the fee schedule, I said. A few heads turned. She smiled the way you smile at a toddler repeating a new word. Richard, be reasonable. Oversight costs money. Good oversight is paid in receipts, I said. Not adjectives. She lowered her voice an octave. It got warmer, but not kinder. You've put everyone in a difficult position. The clause put us in a clear one, I said. Stick to it and we'll both get to go home dry. She leaned closer. I could smell the faint sweetness of the lotion she favors gardenia, artificial, determined. Emily can't handle this, she whispered, a reprise of the line that bought the furniture. And if you keep overcomplicating, you'll force my hand. Your hand is already in the drawer, I said. I'm merely naming the cutlery. We stood in a small silence, the kind that has walls. She looked past me as if a better conversation might be happening behind my head. You always make everything heavy, she said. We're just trying to protect her. I wanted to tell her about heaviness, furnaces and frozen pipes and envelopes folded lengthwise, and the weight of a promise carried quietly until it burns your hands. Instead, I said, send the fee schedule. When I got home, Emily was waiting on the porch, a bag of groceries at her feet, milk, eggs, fruit, and the bread she bakes on Sundays. Her eyes asked the question she didn't want to put into the world. They'll try to freeze distributions, I said. We won't let them. The paper's on our side, even if the room isn't. She nodded, jaw set in that soft way she has strength that doesn't need to shout. Tell me what to do, she said. Keep your receipts, I said. Email the attorney when payments arrive or don't. No adjectives, no apologies, just dates and amounts and what they were for. And if someone asks me if I can handle money, she asked, the taste of the phrase bitter in her mouth. Ask them to define handle, I said. Then watch them fumble the utensils. 2 days later, The attorney forwarded me an all-caps subject line from my aunt's accountant. Urgent. Temporary halt to disbursements necessary. The body was calmer, but just as hungry. Consolidation, verification, fiduciary duty, best practices words that behave like adults until you put a bill in front of them. I wrote back with numbers, not feelings. The trust's paragraph 6C mandates monthly distributions from rental income. Interim trustee status does not suspend 6C attachments, bank statements, rent ledger, prior disbursement dates. Please confirm continuation within 5 business days. I CC'd Emily and my own email twice, once from my phone and once from the desk. Because redundancy is an umbrella you don't regret carrying when the weather decides to be itself. Then I printed a copy and slid it into a file labeled Trust, Clause C, Proofs. Paper keeps better in the cold. I keep mine in a drawer near the floor, where the house remembers winter even in July. News moves on quiet feet. The shift was small at first. Family friends asking Emily in the grocery aisle if she was managing okay, a neighbor offering unsolicited budgeting tips, my cousin's wife sending a link to an app that rounds up your purchases to save pennies. Penny saving is a language spoken fluently by people who imagine your dollars are misbehaving. A week later, the betrayal came with ceremony. A family meeting called at my aunt's house, lemon polish announcing itself at the door. We gathered around the same table that had hosted the whisper, cousins and spouses, and the old friend who had once borrowed my truck and returned it with a full tank and a new dent. My aunt had placed folders at each seat blue for those she considered allies, gray for the rest. Mine was gray. She opened the meeting with a tone crafted for minutes. "We're here to ensure transparency," she said. "Given Richard's resistance to streamlining, we need consensus." Consensus is a coat rack where people hang their coats and pretend they are all the same size. She laid out the argument with practiced pauses. Emily was overwhelmed. The trust was outdated. My involvement was clouding accountability. Oversight would be temporary, fees modest, results stabilizing. She glanced at me on clouding to see if I would rise. I didn't. I let the words stack until they listed. When she finished, I asked one question. "Show us the fee schedule." She blinked. The accountant cleared his throat. "Administrative costs will follow industry standard," he said. "Name it," I said. "Percentages vary by..." "Name it," I said again. "The way you repeat a command to a dog who has learned you mean it the second time." 3%, he said at last, too quickly, then added, "of gross." "Gross is a generous friend," I said. "The clause allows 2 of net." Murmurs then, the room's carpet reshuffling itself around feet. My cousin shifted, the leather of his shoe reminding everyone it was here to be seen. My aunt smiled with teeth. "You're quibbling," she said. "We are discussing principles." "Principles sign checks," I said. "And I sign repairs. Shall we read the clause aloud?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Everyone in the room is fluent in the language of who just won a small thing. The meeting devolved into sentences that sounded like public service announcements. At the end, she tried to close with a summary that put me in the corner and left her near the door. I let her finish. Then I put my file folder on the table and slid a single page across the wood toward her. A letter drafted by the attorney memorializing our quarter-long terms distributions unchanged. Repairs mine, fees capped, no adjectives, just ink. "We've already agreed," I said. She didn't touch the page. She didn't need to. The room had seen it. That night, the house felt warmer without the thermostat moving. Some winds don't add heat. They remove drafts. Betrayal isn't always a storm. Sometimes it's a steady leak behind a wall. You don't hear it until you smell the rot. The next leak was the whisper campaign rephrased into the future tense. "We'll just say she can't handle money." Became, "Everyone knows she can't handle money." That's the alchemy of gossip. Turn a plan into a memory and skip the part where you prove it happened. Emily heard it first from a coworker, then from a friend's mother, then from a cashier who meant well. I could tell by the way Emily's messages changed shorter, denser, the punctuation doing more work than usual. I told her the same thing I tell tenants when the upstairs neighbor gets a drum set. Noise isn't the truth. We'll fix what we can and outlast the rest. Meanwhile, Lorraine Management and Trust Services escalated its outreach. A second tenant notice appeared, this one clarifying that repair requests to me would be redirected for consistency. The font was bolder, the watermark was still cheap, the email alias bounced twice before delivering. The server was misconfigured. That told me more than any memo. People who intend to be permanent configure their servers correctly. I paid an electrician from my list to fix a flickering stairwell light at the duplex. He sent me a photo of the work ticket, date and time stamped, signed by the tenant. I slid it into the proofs file with the quiet satisfaction of a man stacking firewood. Then came the mailer, trifold glossy, mailed to family, friends, and stakeholders. A word that tries to make tribes look like committees. The front panel showed a stock photo of a smiling young woman receiving a check from trustworthy hands. The caption read, "Guardians of a Young Woman's Future." Inside, bullet points. Independent oversight, professional standards, transparency. It landed in mailboxes like sleep pretty from a distance, stinging up close. My neighbor across the street brought hers over with a look that asked permission to be angry on my behalf. "You seeing this?" she said, tapping the glossy with 2 fingers. "Feels off." "It is," I said, "but off can be quiet. We'll keep to our lane." I wrote 3 letters that evening. The first to the attorney. A formal objection to off-clause communications implying incapacity. I cited specific paragraphs, attached the mailer, and underlined the line that mattered. Any insinuation about beneficiaries' competence must be supported by court order, none of which exists here. The second to my aunt, via certified mail. A request for immediate cessation of third-party communications that misstate trust terms, with demand for retraction mailed to the same list. The third, to myself, in the form of bullet points on the yellow pad. Don't get loud. Get recorded. Every claim, ask for paper. Every paper, ask for signature. The next morning I took a drive. The kind where you roll the windows down even if the air is silly with pollen. Because sometimes your head needs wind more than your sinuses need peace. I ended up at the cemetery without meaning to. My sister's stone sits under a maple that learned shade from a master. I brushed away a leaf and told her about clauses and fees and fonts that try too hard. I told her Emily was steady. I told her the plan was simple. Build quietly while they stage loudly. It's the way old houses survive by staying plumb while storms decorate the sky. On the way home, I stopped at the new duplex. The left unit, the one with the heart-shaped hangar, is rented now to the mother-daughter pair. The right unit sits empty, almost ready. New caulk along the tub. A door that needed an honest plane. Paint that would be dry by tomorrow. On the fridge, I taped a short note to myself. Tenant criteria are a kindness when they are a boundary. Do not confuse the two. When I stepped back onto the stoop, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin. He wanted to meet. Just the two of us, he said. Man to man. We met at a diner with laminated menus and a waitress who calls everyone Han in a way that manages not to be corny. He arrived in a fresh suit, then hung the jacket so it wouldn't wrinkle when he tried to look casual. He ordered an espresso and didn't drink it. "Look," he said, lowering his voice like a man about to sell a watch from inside a sleeve. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Sign the management agreement, let the pros do their thing, and we'll make sure Emily still gets enough to live on." "Enough," I said. "Define it." "Rent and groceries," he said. "The basics. You know, so she doesn't have to worry." "You mean so you can?" I said. He held up a hand. "You've got, 2 rental doors now? You'll be fine. Don't be greedy." Greedy. I let the words sit on the formica between us like a fly. Then I looked at him and thought of a winter long ago when I found him stranded with a dead battery and spent an hour in slicing wind, coaxing life into his engine. He had never once told that story at a table. He preferred stories where he was the one who showed up to save someone else. "Here's what will happen," I said, and watched his shoulders react to the word will. "Distributions will continue per clause. Fees will remain within percentage. Tenant repair requests will go where they should. Any deviation will be recorded and objected to in writing. I will not sign away control to a logo that didn't exist last Tuesday." He leaned back and tried to laugh. "You sound like a notary." "Notaries are the last honest people in a lot of rooms," I said. He lowered his voice further. "Aunt Lorraine can make things inconvenient." "Inconvenience is a spice," I said. "It makes people overestimate how hot the dish really is." He frowned, confused by a sentence that refused to be a threat. The waitress refilled my coffee and touched my shoulder with a kindness that only costs a second and changes the temperature of an hour. I paid the check, left tip in cash, and walked out into noonlight that made the parking lot look like it had been freshly washed. The next week brought a different kind of cold. A letter from a bank I didn't recognize, requesting authorization to assume control of revenue and reserves for the trust property. The signature line had my aunt's flourish, and a blank where mine should have been. I wrote declined across the bottom in block letters, signed my name, scanned it, and sent the PDF with the subject line, non-consent to account transfer. Trust paragraph 6. Then I printed the scan, filed it under proofs, and went outside to breathe air that hadn't been inside a printer. I found myself in the yard with a rake in my hands, pulling old leaves free from the fence where winter had tucked them. There's a pleasure in simple tools, wood handle warm from the sun, tines dragging through what the season left behind. I thought about tools and how money is just one of them. I thought about how many people pretend a tool is a throne, and how many mistakes begin when you start believing the story your tool is telling you about yourself. By Friday, my aunt blinked. The attorney forwarded a revised transition plan that adhered reluctantly precisely to the clause we'd already agreed to. Distributions continued. Fees reduced to their proper 2% of net. Tenant communications copied. Repair authority acknowledged. It arrived without apology, just as I expected. Paper has no cheeks to blush. The day after, a text from the daughter at my new duplex. Mom asks if it's okay to have a small plant on the stoop. I told her yes, with a saucer under it so water doesn't stain the concrete. She replied with a photo of a fern that looked like a green hand asking a question. I told her it looked good. She sent a thank you with a period at the end, a rare courtesy, a full stop that felt like a promise to keep the noise down after 10. That evening, Emily came over with 2 pastries and the day's small story. Someone had tried the question about whether she could handle money. She had asked them to define handle. They had changed the subject to whether. We ate the pastries at the table with the nick where a glass broke, and the house felt even again. Here is the truth about season 3. The betrayal didn't crest. It seeped. It tried to freeze a distribution here, redirect a repair there, change a signatory over coffee and a smile. It dressed itself in fonts and phrases and committees. It spoke softly and expected me to either shout or shrink. I did neither. I kept the paper straight, the files labeled, the dates exact. I raked the yard. I returned to the duplex with a bag of screws and a plane and made a door fit its frame the way a sentence should fit its meaning. By the end of the month, the money moved on schedule, the fees shrank to what the clause allowed, and the tenant still called me when the stairwell light flickered. My aunt did not apologize. Apologies require oxygen her rooms don't carry. But she paused. People who decorate betrayals don't like it when the studs behind the drywall refuse to move. On my yellow pad, I wrote, when they undercut, tighten your measurements. When they gloss, sand lightly. When they talk about you, do the work in front of them. Underneath, one more line. Next, invite their world to knock on my door. I looked at the extra set of keys on the table, the second unit, almost ready, and felt the quiet click inside me when numbers line up with intent. It isn't triumph, it's alignment. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. Defense buys you time. Offense buys you ground. After months of contesting papers and blocking freezes, I realized time alone wouldn't balance the ledger. They wanted me on the sidelines, muttering over clauses while they dressed themselves in titles. I wanted them to sit under my roof, not even realizing whose floor held them steady. That's when the Alvarez duplex became more than property. It became strategy. The left unit already held the mother and daughter who kept a tidy fern on the stoop. They were steady tenants, rent on time, no noise complaints. The right unit, freshly painted and smelling faintly of primer, went on the market. Within 48 hours, the inquiry came written in careful sentences, neat as ledger lines. I'm looking for a modest 2-bedroom near the bus line. References available. The name made me pause. Anna, my aunt's daughter. I read the email twice, then listened to the voicemail that followed. She explained that she and her fiancé were expecting a baby. Money was thin. They needed a clean place, smaller and affordable. It wasn't a trick. The details checked out. I called her back the next morning, my voice flat, professional. Units available. Bring references, income proofs, and deposit if you're serious. When she arrived, she looked worn down by life, in a way family dinners never showed. The fiancé stayed in the car. She walked the space slowly, running a hand over windowsills, opening cabinets as if testing their honesty. It's nice, she said quietly. I gave her the application. She filled it with the precision of someone who feared a mistake would cost her more than she had. I called her references that evening. The employer said she was reliable, quiet. The landlord said she left a unit better than she found it. By the next day, I approved her. Rent due on the 1st. 5-day grace. Late fee after. Deposit in full. The same rules I apply to strangers. She nodded and signed, her signature small on the page. The cashier's check trembled in her hand before it landed in mine. That night, I filed the lease with the rest. The keys sat warm in my pocket. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I only wrote one line on my pad. They whispered I couldn't handle money. Now their money handles me. Part 2. The first envelope arrived right on schedule cashier's check, folded neat. I logged it, filed it. A quiet victory, cleaner than any confrontation. By month 2, I visited for inspection. Anna answered in slippers, hair tied back, fatigue across her face like a shawl. A baby blanket hung drying on a chair. "Everything working?" I asked. "Yes," she said softly. Then after a pause, "Thank you. We needed this place. Pay on time, keep it clean. It's yours," I said. Her fiancé pretended to tighten his shoelaces rather than meet my eyes. Men who avoid a landlord's gaze usually owe more than rent. I left without comment. Silence in these cases is sturdier than lectures. By the 3rd month, word had reached my aunt. She caught me outside church, her voice honeyed but sharp. "You rented to Anna?" "I rented to a tenant." I corrected. "She's family. She's under contract." Her lips pinched. "How could you let your niece struggle to pay you?" "How could you let your niece need me?" I asked. Her face tightened, then smoothed into performance. "You're making a spectacle." "No," I said. "I'm keeping records." From then on, her greetings grew shorter, her smiles thinner. She never mentioned the rent checks, but I knew she pictured them. Each month, her daughter's signature was proof that my competence wasn't theory. It was cashable. Emily asked once, "Does it feel good?" "It feels correct," I told her. "Good is for birthdays. Correct is for ledgers." She nodded, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. She understood. By month 6, Anna delivered her child. Her fiancé handed me the rent envelope in a hospital parking lot, his hands shaking. "We might be late next month," he muttered. "Late has a fee," I said evenly. 5% after the 5th. "You know the terms." He nodded, ashamed. The baby cried in the back seat. Compassion tempted me, but compassion without boundaries turns into ruin. A lease is not cruelty, it's clarity. At family gatherings, my aunt avoided my eyes. She spoke louder about prudence and responsibility, while her daughter's rent bought the bread on her table. I didn't argue. Hypocrisy ages quickly when left in silence. Season 4 closed quietly. A signed lease, steady payments, and proof stacking each month. My aunt's whisper had tried to erase my competence. Instead, her own daughter's checks wrote it back line by line. In ink the bank had to honor. Some revenge arrives in thunder. Mine arrived in envelopes. Decline rarely happens in a straight line. It doesn't fall clean like an axe. It bends, sways, creaks like an old beam, until one morning it snaps under weight you thought it could carry forever. My aunt's downfall began that way, slow, disguised as dignity, hidden under pearls and lemon polish. It started with little things, a hairline crack in her front step that she never patched, the gutter that leaned forward like it was tired of holding on, a roof shingle or two that curled up at the edges, whispering of water stains to come. Small details most people ignored. But I knew better. Buildings talk when they're tired, and Lorraine's house was muttering louder each month. At first, I thought maybe it was nothing, just neglect, a vanity project postponed. But then the stories began. Neighbors whispered about tight times. Church ladies mentioned Lorraine had asked to split the cost of floral arrangements, something she used to cover with a wave of her hand. Subtle shifts, small hints that the woman who once boasted control of every account was counting pennies herself. Meanwhile, her daughter, my tenant, paid me steadily. Every 30 days the envelope arrived. On time, precise, unquestionable. Sometimes Anna brought it with the baby on her hip, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. Sometimes the fiancé delivered it, avoiding my gaze, holding the check like it was a live coal. But it always came. Rent doesn't lie. And with every deposit, I grew richer not just in dollars, but in dignity reclaimed. Lorraine must have felt the sting. I never said a word, but she knew. Every rent check her daughter handed over was a reminder that the man she whispered against was now the one carrying her bloodline's roof. The irony would have crushed a more honest person. Lorraine tried to pretend it didn't exist. She doubled down on appearances, pearls at every gathering, hair sprayed to an immovable shine, speeches about prudence and stability. But her eyes betrayed her. They flickered, darting to the floor whenever mine found hers. Decline had started to ink itself across her face, and she couldn't sand it away. Her financial cracks widened when her little management empire began to sag. The fees she skimmed from the trust bled it faster than she expected. She'd spent too many years treating administration as personal income, and when repairs piled up, real repairs, not just line items, the math turned against her. One evening, I passed by her property and saw 2 shingles missing altogether, rain tapping directly into the underlayment. The sight felt like a metaphor. A roof losing its cover, lies losing their polish. The gossip caught up quickly. Friends she'd relied on began to drift. At church socials, her circle thinned. People she'd once counted as allies now nodded politely, then turned away. No one wanted to tie their name to a sinking ship. She'd whispered me weak for years, but now weakness had pulled up a chair at her own table. The real breaking point came when Anna's fiancé lost his job. Rent still came, but the envelope felt heavier in his trembling hand. One month, it landed on my desk 4 days late. By contract, that was a 5% fee. I enforced it. No exceptions. Not even for family. Especially not for family. When Anna arrived to pay the fee herself, she didn't argue. She signed the receipt with quiet dignity, baby balanced against her shoulder. She understood. Rules are rules, and the roof above her head was worth the cost. For a moment, I felt a pang of respect. She at least had learned what her mother never did. Clarity is kinder than favoritism. When Lorraine heard about the late fee, she called me, voice dripping with fury. How could you fine your own niece? That's cruelty. It's policy, I said calmly. And policy keeps houses standing. She threatened lawyers, threatened court, threatened shame. But we both knew the lease was airtight. She had no leverage, no claws to twist. Her words rattled against a wall that wouldn't move. After that, her decline accelerated. At the next family dinner, she arrived late, eyes red, voice hoarse. She barely spoke. She picked at her food, left early. The woman who once commanded every room now fled from them. Even the cousins who used to orbit her power looked uneasy. They asked me quietly about repairs, about the trust, about Emily's well-being. Their loyalty had shifted. The room had changed sides without ceremony. Lorraine must have felt it too. She stopped coming to dinners altogether. Her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. People filled the silence with speculation. Health issues, financial stress, pride. No one said the truth aloud. She had lost the battle without even realizing it had begun. Her downfall wasn't a spectacular fall. It was arithmetic. Rent checks going one direction, trust funds shrinking in another. Respect draining slowly, month after month. By the end of that year, Lorraine had become what she once accused me of being. Someone others pitied in whispers. And I didn't lift a finger to strike her down. I simply enforced the contracts, logged the receipts, and let time tally the score. Her decline was the most elegant revenge I could ask for. Not shouted, not staged, not violent, just quiet, undeniable proof that silence when held steady will outlast a whisper every single time. Revenge, the kind that earns respect instead of applause, doesn't end with a door slammed or a judge's gavel. It ends at a table that remembers the weight of paper. Mine is maple, nicked where a glass broke 2 summers ago, warm to the hand in late afternoon. I sat there on a Tuesday with the file marked Alvarez Duplex open, the ledger line for Unit B running straight as a taut string. Rent received, receipt issued, deposit made, no drama, no notes in the margin. Just proof that patience keeps better than pride. Outside, the street hummed with the ordinary delivery trucks braking. A bicycle bell. A neighbor calling a dog by 2 names because love never sticks to just one. Inside, the refrigerator kept time beneath the clock, a low hymn to continuity. I endorsed Anna's latest check with a pen that writes evenly, and thought about how money behaves when you don't ask it to perform. It returns what effort put in, minus friction plus time. In winter, decline gets loud in wood and quiet in people. Lorraine's house had started speaking in the way old houses do when the corners lose their faith. The front step cracked down the center. The gutter inched away from its brackets and hung there like a loose sentence. I saw it one afternoon when I drove past without meaning to the way you reroute to see a grave and only admit it when you're already at the gate. Rain stitched the shingle line into a darker thread. Water doesn't negotiate. It keeps a simpler ledger than most families. The call came 3 days after the ice storm, her number lighting my phone like a memory you don't owe but take anyway. Richard, she said, her voice carefully dressed. I've had issues with the roof. The estimate is unreasonable. Send it, I said. She did. I put on my glasses and read it at the table, steam rising from my coffee like a quiet warning. The contractor hadn't lied. Winter never does. She needed flashing, decking in 2 places, shingles throughout the west slope, and a length of gutter that no longer believed in gravity. The total landed where it should land. Fair hurts when you wanted mercy. I can refer 2 other roofers, I told her. They'll be within 100 either way. Replace what's failing or you'll buy it twice. Can you handle it? She asked, a sliver of the old tone cutting through control, trying to stand again. I'm retired, I said, and if I weren't, I would still insist on a signed scope, half up front, half upon inspection. You don't have half. She breathed in, then out, a sound that had always been for effect. I could arrange a line of credit. With what collateral? She didn't answer. We both knew her house had been working harder than it looked. I'll email the referrals, I said. Ask for itemized scopes. Do not sign allowances you can't track. Ugh. There was a pause long enough for me to hear the wall clock lose a second and then find it again. Thank you, she said, the words arriving as if they had a long way to travel. I sent the names. She hired one. The crew hammered in the cold while her shade stayed at half-mast. I watched the ridge cap go down from my truck, the men moving with that winter efficiency I used to know in my hands. The bill arrived, and with it a truth no speech could reshape. Repairs don't care about reputations. A week later, Anna texted, "Can we add Mom to our lease as an occupant for a while? Just until her place is less chaotic." The ellipsis did a lot of work. I pictured Lorraine in a guest room that smelled faintly of primer and laundry soap, listening to the baby breathe. Pride doesn't survive night feedings. Nothing theatrical does. Occupancy is fine, I replied. Lease addendum needed. No subletting. No changes to rent. Quiet hours as written. Sign and return by Friday. They did. The new signature line left a small tremor on the page, where Lorraine wrote her middle initial like a shield. I filed the addendum behind Unit B, current. Paper respects sequence more than people do. When I inspected a month later, I knocked and waited the full count of 5 before using the key. The apartment smelled like chamomile and warmed milk, the clean mix of effort and surrender. Lorraine stood in the hall awkwardly, as if she were still deciding which role fit. Guest, mother, debtor, woman who once set the table and now clears it. Mr. Mallory, she said, and the formality felt like a coat worn inside. Ma'am, I said, because that's how you give dignity back without discounting it. I tightened a loose hinge in the kitchen, tested the GFCI, noted a bit of caulk starting to fail near the tub. Nothing dramatic. The baby hiccuped in the next room like punctuation. Anna thanked me twice, once at the door, once by text an hour later, as if gratitude needed a receipt too. Spring edged in by smell before it arrived by date wet soil, the sweet fatigue of thaw. The guttermen finished their work at Lorraine's house, and for a few weeks the place pretended strength again. But pretending is a bad tenant. It doesn't pay long. Property taxes came due with their grave little envelopes. The oil furnace tried once to catch and then sulked. A letter from her insurer asked for photographic proof of prior repairs, then asked again, then sent the new premium with the math explained in the grim courtesy of actuarial print. She called Anna at night. Walls have ears, children's bedrooms have hearts. I didn't have to hear the exact words to know their shapes. Too much, can't. If only, I thought. Pride borrows. Reality collects. 2 months later, a sign went up in Lorraine's yard for sale by owner. The most expensive 4 words most people ever write. She had priced it at what she needed, not what it was worth. Buyers don't attend your narrative. They attend appraisals. I drove by once, only once, and kept my eyes forward like a man passing the scene of an old argument. The grass had tried its best. The porch light burned at noon. The house looked like a memory that wanted to be believed, and couldn't quite pull it off. She called me after the first weekend showings. It's a brutal market, she said, as if the weather had turned on her out of spite. It's a market, I said. Brutal is when numbers learn to speak. She didn't laugh. I didn't expect her to. I might need a bridge, she said finally. Short-term rental. Something manageable. Apply, I said. Bring statements. Proof of income. References. First month and deposit. Apply, she repeated, soft with disbelief, as if the word had never lined up next to her. Everyone applies, I said. It keeps the walls standing in the same direction. She didn't answer. She hung up without the goodbye she uses on people she plans to see again soon. I put the phone down, wrote if she comes, treat her like everyone on the yellow pad, then crossed out like everyone and wrote like someone. It matters, the difference. Summer taught the baby to laugh. The sound bled through Unit B's door like a small mercy. Lorraine moved more comfortably in the apartment by then, wearing house shoes and a sweater that had seen better rooms. I saw her once carrying a bag of groceries up the stairs slowly, the kind of slow that says a person has started counting their steps ahead of time. The for sale sign got a price slash, then another. The house resisted conversion to cash. They all resist at first. Then a young couple came with a real agent and a real offer with a real inspection, which found two real problems Lorraine couldn't afford to pretend about. She accepted less than she'd planned, not because the buyers were clever, but because math had more crew on site than her story did. On a Tuesday, she called. "The closing is scheduled," she said, voice flat the way new concrete is flat. "I need a place." The pause between the last two words measured out 15 years of our family's weather. "There's an opening in Unit A," I said. "Month to month only. Market rent. No discount. You'll need a cosigner if your income doesn't meet the ratio." She inhaled like I had opened a window she didn't remember installing. "A cosigner," she repeated. "Anna qualifies," I said. "If she's willing." "That's—" She cut the word before it became humiliating. Pride knows when it's about to embarrass you and tries to bite your tongue first. "That's possible," she finished. I emailed the application. She printed it at the library, filled it in careful blue ink, and brought it to me in a manila folder. Corners softened by hands that used to hand other people folders like this without looking inside. I scanned the bank statements. Modest retirement income. Social Security. A savings account that looked like a pond in late August. I called the references she listed. Two were loyal. One was honest. Honest is worth more. She brought the deposit in a cashier's check. Her signature had trembled into a second initial and then recovered. At the bottom of the lease, she wrote her name fully, the way a person remembers their own outline only when asked to trace it. On move-in day, I carried the dolly while Anna and the fiancé negotiated the couch the way couples negotiate a future. Corner, first, hopeful, uncoordinated, earnest. Lorraine directed traffic with a politeness that landed like apologies. She thanked me twice, 3 times, and then stopped as if 3 times was the maximum her math allowed. That evening, when the unit had found its first order dishes coaxed into cabinets, towels occupying their intended hooks, a lamp making a rectangle of light on a box that would be a nightstand when tomorrow got around to caring, I taped the standard welcome letter to the inside of her door. How to reach me for emergencies. How to handle trash. What day the city believes in recycling. Where the main shutoff lives if the pipes forget themselves. I sign all my letters the same way. R. Mallory. I do not write uncle in front of landlord. Both are true. Only one keeps walls vertical. The first rent check, drawn on a new account, arrived on the first like a contrition that had learned the calendar. The envelope was addressed to Miss Mallory in handwriting that had supervised bake sales and bylaws with equal vigor once. The signature was small but steady. I endorsed it without looking for poetry where procedure belongs. A week later, we crossed in the stairwell. She was coming down as I was coming up with a filter and a wrench, because Unit A had decided to hum in a way I didn't like. She stepped aside and placed a hand against the wall like it was a friend. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For taking the application like you take all the others," she said, assembling the sentence while she held it. "For not making it a scene." "We keep scenes in theaters," I said. "In buildings, we keep maintenance logs." She almost smiled. It didn't reach where smiles used to live in her. It reached far enough. By fall, routines had settled into place with the quiet weight of furniture. She mailed the check. I logged it. I replaced a furnace igniter at cost and sent the receipt with the next month's ledger. She wrote back to ask why no markup and then caught herself halfway through the question, as if she didn't want to accidentally praise me. I wrote, "Work is either worth something or it isn't. Markups don't make it more true." Emily came by on Sundays more often, her life inching toward a new shape made of savings and plans that didn't need permission. We ate soup over the maple table and talked about paint colors that look like calm and jobs that don't lie, and how a bank account is just a story with fewer adjectives. I did not need to tell her that the woman who once whispered about her inability now wrote my name on envelopes. She knew. Families own their silence the way land owns its survey. Winter again. Snow rucked up along the curb, car hoods steaming like animals after a run. I salted the stairs before dawn and knocked ice free from the downspouts with a gloved knuckle. Lorraine opened her door as I finished. She had a scarf on over a sweater that had belonged to a brighter house. Behind her, the apartment looked warm, lived in, modest. It looked honest. That's all most rooms ever wanted to be. "Do you need anything?" I asked, the way landlords ask when they mean it, and also mean, "Please don't invent anything for me to do." "No," she said. and then added, because truth takes practice. Not from you, anyway. We stood there, breath making small clouds. Somewhere down the block, someone scraped a windshield with more ambition than success. The world made its winter noises. She pulled the scarf tighter and looked at me the way people look at the tool you choose, wondering what it would say if it could talk back. I was wrong, she said. The scarf kept her voice from evaporating. About handling money. About a lot. I didn't move. I didn't put a hand on her shoulder. The steps were slick. We respect physics in this house. Words are receipts, I said finally. Sometimes they're late. Sometimes they're for the wrong amount. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 to balance the line. She nodded once, as if a single inch was all the apology could afford. Well, she said, I'll get the check out this afternoon. That's the one that always counts, I said. When the mail came, it did clean, folded lengthwise, a number that told the truth with no extra sermon attached. I endorsed it, logged it, filed it. Then I made tea and sat at the table where all of this had learned to become itself. Here is the ending, if you need one. Not a victory lap. Not a scene in which a man reads a speech and a room transforms. Just a kitchen in winter. A ledger balanced. A roof that keeps weather where weather belongs. And a woman who once declared me unfit writing my name on the line that keeps her door opening and closing in the right places. When people ask, later, how I won, I will say, I didn't. I waited. I counted. I repaired what broke. I refused to decorate the truth. I never raised my voice. I never turned the screws where a key would do. And then one day the person who called me incompetent asked me for the right to keep a light on after dark. She asked in the language that respects what things cost. She asked with a check. Some tea is best served cold. Mine is delivered monthly, in envelopes that don't lie, to a table that remembers the first whisper and the last receipt, and knows the difference between a story told loudly and a life kept level.